Hey there everyone, welcome back to another video here with me, Jenny Kirk, up in the loft. We've got Weir Yard up here. Progress is coming along nicely, but a good deal of you have been asking me about Top's wagon codes. So I thought I'd just try and do a quick and easy, simple guide to some of the nuances of the Top's lettering that is seen on wagons and also some coaches. But I'm going to get into this, and I'm going to start off at the beginning of the alphabet. And the Top's codes are actually quite easy to get your head round once you realise how they're put together. First set of codes that I'm going to look into is B, and this is where you see three letters on a wagon. The first letter is B, and that stands for bogie bolster. So we've got here the new Daypole BEV that recently we were reviewing, and this is a bogie bolster. The second letter denotes the type of bogie bolster, so that's like a subcategory within the main category. With this one, it's a bogie bolster E, hence BE. The final letter is to do with the braking system. So there's a whole host of different braking systems that wagons can have, including the brakes themselves, no brakes, even through piping, and combinations thereof. And this is really important because when shunters are putting together trains, it's important to know which wagons will work with which other wagons to ensure that there is enough braking force for the train to run safely. So with this wagon, the final letter is a V, and that means that this wagon has vacuum braking. So it has brakes that act on the wagon itself through the vacuum braking system, but then obviously subsequent wagons in the train can also be vacuum braked. Sticking with the B code, I've got here a Bachmann BCO, and again B for bogie bolster, the C because it's a bogie bolster C, and then O means that this is unbraked. So it will have a handbrake so it doesn't roll away when it's stationary, parks up in a siding, but there are no train brakes with this, and there are no through pipes either. So if this is in a train, this wagon cannot transmit a brake through to the subsequent wagons, so they will all remain unbraked even if they are coded with V for vacuum cylinders or otherwise. So essentially this is a completely unfitted wagon. Now I'm going to move on to C. So first letter of your three-letter code, C. And I've got some wagons here to illustrate that. So this is a press flow cement, and it's coded CPV. It's a Bachmann wagon. Really nice wagons, came out quite some time ago, and actually a firm favourite of mine back in Hornby 00 days. Hornby 00 did really nice couple of models of these, but it's coded CPV. So we've got the C for it's a covered merchandise wagon, and what's important is it's a covered merchandise wagon that's not something like a van. So that is a different, distinct category. The P is for that subcategory within that for the press flow cement. Quite often these second letters, they hark back to their pre-Tops categories, so it does make it a little bit easier to work it out. And then we've got the V at the end, vacuum braked. This wagon has vacuum brakes that act on the wagon itself and obviously then will transmit that vacuum brake onto the next wagon in the train. To illustrate other alternatives within the C category, we've got a grain wagon, again, wonderful model from Bachmann, and this one is coded CGO. So we've got the C for the covered merchandise wagon, the G because this is a grain wagon, another happy coincidence that helps you remember exactly what it is and just, makes it easier to identify. And then the O means, again, like the BCO, it's completely unbraked and there is no through piping. Now, the C category contains a little bit of an anomaly, and this is something, once you get your head around it, it's quite easy, but brake vans are also, for some strange reason, coded within the C subsection. So I've got here a brake van, and this is coded CAP. So we've got the C, it just happens to be that brake vans are in there. I'm not really quite sure why. The A, and then the P, this is a new letter that we've not touched on just yet. The P means that whilst there are no brakes on this wagon other than its handbrake that act on the wagon itself, it has through vacuum piping, P for piping, and that means that this could go within a train and still transmit that vacuum signal through the wagon and give a vacuum to the wagons behind it, and they would still be able to brake even though there's no brakes on this wagon. And actually the guard as well in this would have a valve, and he could destroy the vacuum, so he could actually apply the brakes to the train even though all he has for this wagon is a handbrake. Now, to give you another illustration of a brake van, we've got here one coded CAR. Again, the C and the A for brake vans, and the R. Now, this is quite a common code on brake vans, and this means that it is through vacuum piped, but also through air piped. So the R is both of those braking systems through piped, but no actual train brakes other than the handbrake that the guard can apply on this wagon. And again, the guard would have the means to either destroy the vacuum with a valve that they can open, or destroy the air pressure again by opening a valve, and apply the train brakes if needed to from this, despite the fact that the wagon itself doesn't have brakes of its own. Now, a lot of brake vans were through piped, either air or vacuum or both, but it's actually quite rare for them to have train-acting brakes. They did exist, but they were in a minority and tended to disappear quite quickly and have their vacuum braking systems removed at overhaul. Now, we're going to move on now to F, because this is the next example that I have for you. F, quite easy to remember, is flat wagons. Now, I don't have many flat wagons that are tops lettered in my collection, but this is the Oxford Rail Motor Rail flat, and it is coded FVX. So the F for a flat wagon, and there's a multitude of different types of flat wagon that did exist. For example, you have the container flats, a lot of them are coded in the F series, but also conflats. So conflat A, for example, would have had the code FAV. But this particular one, based on a former LMS coach chassis, they were run in the motor rail trains, could carry, as you see here, got loaded up with some Oxford die-cast cars, but coded FVX. The V, well, easy to remember, for carrying vehicles. And now the X, again, another new letter on the braking system codes. And what X means is a bit like the letter R, but instead of being through piped, X denotes that it has both vacuum braking and air braking, so it's dual brakes. And that means that this wagon can run in both air brake trains and vacuum brake trains, and has brakes that will work in both of those trains. So it's actually a really useful code, and will be used on wagons in particular, like for example this, that would be expected to work with a wide variety of other items of rolling stock. So that's F for you. Now, H. H is quite a big subsection, and the H stands for hopper. So I'm going to show you a few examples here. So the ones that I've got to hand, HEA, one of my favourite wagons actually from the air braked wagons. And this is a Bachmann wagon, coded HEA, and essentially what you've got there is H for hopper. The E denotes the subsection, so it's this very distinctive wagon. There's a lot of other wagons in the H series, so HAAs, which are very common, or at least were very common, as the stereotypical merry-go-round wagons. But this particular one, I remember these very distinctively from my time living up in the northeast, trundling through Durham Station. So that's the HEA. But then you have an interesting thing, and I'm going to bring this up because it did sometimes happen, that the tops code could be subtly different to denote the actual traffic flows or usages of a wagon. So you could have a wagon that looks ostensibly the same outwardly, but with a slightly different code. So we've had the HEA, and I'm going to bring two more wagons here, and from a distance they look exactly the same, but we've got one coded HBA, and what that B is denoting is that there's a difference in the actual suspension on these, and it's to do with how fast these wagons were able to run in a train. So it was quite important to be able to differentiate between a HBA and a HEA, because it would affect how fast that train could run out on the main line. Very important for keeping timings. So that's the significance of that. But then we've also got a HSA. And actually, the HSA represents the HEA right at the very end of its life. And some of these, they had the bottom doors welded up, and they were used for carrying scrap that was loaded by grabs taken out by electromagnets. And actually, they weren't very successful. Generally speaking, the wagons became scrap very quickly, but they did have their own code to differentiate them, and that was HSA. But of course, the HBA, the HEA, and the HSA all outwardly look pretty similar. Now, there are wagons in the I and the J categories and the K, but all of these are much more modern, and they come outside of the period which I tend to model. So we're going to move on to M, and M, again, another one to remember quite easily, M for mineral wagons, and I've got a few examples to show you here. So first up, I'm going to show you an MXV. Now this is a Bachmann, pretty standard 16-ton mineral wagon, but later on they received different codes depending ostensibly on the braking system more than anything else. So we've got here an MXV. This is V for vacuum braking, but actually the X, not to be confused with a very similar outwardly looking MCV, is actually denoting the difference between the fundamentals of the braking system of the wagon. So this has brakes that just act with one shoe per wheel, but the MCV had clasp brakes, C for clasp, and they, quite literally what they say, they clasped each wheel with two brake blocks, one either side, and it meant that they had a much better braking force as a result. So, like I said before, you could have two wagons that look outwardly very similar, but have that middle letter changed because of either their use, as we saw with the HBA, HSA, or to do with braking characteristics in the form of the MCV and the MXV. Moving on, again, another 16-ton mineral wagon, but this time we've got the code MCO. And what this actually means is the most important part of this is the O at the end. And that means that this wagon is completely unbraked and no through piping. So again, you can have what looks to be the same wagon, but the braking systems can be very different. And the TOPS code means that at a glance, it is very easy to spot that. And that is very important for the shunters. Another wagon that falls within the M series, we've got the Tipler Wagons. Used a lot for stone on the stone traffic, but this particular one would have been used for ingot moulds, and it's coded MSO. So we've got the S in the middle, different use for a wagon. It is a Tipler wagon, but O for being unbraked. So just another example of a wagon that falls within the M section of TOPS. Now, N is an interesting one because it's not so much a wagon as a non-passenger carrying coach. So that's a coach that's in the revenue fleet, but it's not for passengers. So we've got here an NFV, and this is a former Southern Railway bogie utility van, which would have been used in newspaper traffic by this period in the all-over blue, and it's coded NFV. And essentially the N stands, as I said before, for the non-passenger carrying coaching stock. The F is really to do with its frontline use, so it would denote whether it had fittings inside for taking brute trolleys, or whether it had shelving to take parcels. It gives the ground staff a clue as to whether this coach is what they needed for a particular train. And the V at the end, as we already know, the V is for the vacuum brakes. So just to give you an idea there, and you'll find that pretty much on things like BGs and all sorts carried the N tops codes. Now, O, as you might have already guessed, given how much these tops codes kind of relate to to a characteristic of the wagon that they're being applied to. O is for open wagons, and funnily enough, actually, there's not been too many of the earlier O-coded wagons appear in model form. They appear in their earlier guises, just not with that tops code on, which for somebody like me who likes to model the 70s and 80s tops period is a bit annoying, because I know there's a lot of wagons which would be eminently suitable to be released in those liveries. But one which has come out is from Bachmann, and it's the venerable old China clay wagon, one of the earliest wagons in the Bachmann range. But this one is coded OOV, so it's an open wagon. Don't let the tilt fool you. The canvas tilts don't make it a van or a covered merchandise wagon. It's still underneath that. It's an open wagon. And the O for denoting that this is an open wagon on the China clay traffic. So the V at the end, vacuum braked. It's pretty simple now when we get down to it. So there's an example of the O-coded wagons. And I think as well, somewhere behind me, this is a later air-braked wagon. And I wanted to pick this out to give you an idea on some of the other brake coding letters. So we've got an open C wagon, so OC, and then A. A means that this wagon has air brakes and nothing else. There is no through piping for anything else. So this would run in an air-braked train, and any wagon that followed it would need to be air-braked to be able to have their brakes applied by the locomotive. But P is an interesting tops category. P is where the wagons that were privately owned, hence P-coded, were put. So these were wagons that were owned by somebody other than British Railway, but were registered to be able to run on British Railways. Now these are a lot less common than they had been prior to the Second World War, but they did still exist. Now, in model form, they have come out from time to time, and actually you can get some mildly amusing tops codes like a POO wagon, poo, which was one that I've seen photographs of. I'm not sure whether that has actually appeared in model form. But one that has is the pretty good Oxford Rail wagon exclusively to Hattons of the PHV ICI bogie hoppers. Now, there's quite a few of these that Hattons have done, and we did a review on this model some time ago, but I bring it up here because this is a good example of a wagon that is coded in the P tops range. So we've got the tops code PHV, and there's a part of me thinking that that H, which denotes that it being a hopper, but I haven't seen enough of these to see whether any other private owner hopper wagons would also be coded PHV. But from the rail operating staff's point of view, I guess the V at the end would be the only bit that they were particularly interested in, and that denotes that it's got vacuum train brakes. Now, Q, again, is another bit of a strange one. Q is the code given to departmental non-passenger carrying coaching stock. So I've got here, it's a standard Mark 1 BG from the Bachmann range in all over olive green, and the prototype of this coach would have been used by British Railways in order to actually transfer supplies like spare parts between depots, and to differentiate these from any revenue earning stock that would have been in the N tops category. They were given the tops category of Q. So essentially all that is departmental coaching stock. The R in the middle would denote exactly what it was being used for, as basically a store's transfer vehicle. And the X, we talked about this before, the X means that it's dual braked, both vacuum and air brakes for the train. R is another bit of an odd one. R is barrier vehicles, and of course B is already taken by the bogie bolsters, so they used R. And this could quite literally be almost anything. Usually they were wagons that had formerly been revenue-earning wagons and had just been scrounged and appropriated for the task in hand. So two of the wagons that I've got here in my collection, I've got a number of barrier wagons that have been released throughout the last 10, 15 or so years. And this is one of the Hornby Blue Spot fish vans, but showing it really very much at the tail end of its life. Heavily weathered here, but the fundamental coding on this is RBV. And this is just simply used as a barrier wagon. And it didn't really matter what body was on the wagon. All this was either being used as a reach wagon to allow wagons to be spotted, say, into a factory where the locomotive was too heavy, perhaps, to use a section of track, or maybe the curve was too tight or the clearances were too tight. So they would use these barrier wagons just to space it out. Barrier wagons could also be used for other functions, such as separating dangerous commodities in wagons from other wagons in the trains or from the train locomotive, or in the form of the nuclear trains. We've got here, ostensibly, outwardly at least, is just a simple HEA wagon. But this is actually coded RNA, and the N means it's a nuclear barrier wagon. It doesn't mean there's anything special about the wagon. They were quite simply old redundant HEA wagons, and eventually they did remove the bodies, principally I suppose to stop people from appropriating them to use them as coal hoppers in revenue service. But before that was done, they did run looking exactly like this, coded RNA, to differentiate them from the revenue-earning HEAs. Now, I don't have any wagons in my collection coded S, but these were steel-carrying wagons, different from the bogie bolsters, and these would tend to be four-wheeled wagons with trestles, that kind of thing on, specifically for carrying things like steel coil or steel plate. And it's, again, follows the same rules as all the other tops category. The S denoting it's a steel carrying wagon, and then the middle letter is the subsection, it's the specific type of wagon, and then the letter on the end denoting the braking system. So we move on to T, and T is tanker. Really easy to remember. And I've got a few different tankers in my collection, but actually the main bulk of tankers that survived long enough to get a TOPS code and have been produced in model form are the TTA, got here the Bachmann TTA, we've got the coding on there, and it's just basically T for tanker, T for the type of tanker, in this case a shorter four-wheel wagon with its particular carrying capacity, and the A on the end denoting that it is an air-braked wagon. And then we've got the TEA. Now, it has been produced in model form by Bachmann, but the only example that I have doesn't actually have the TOPS code on, so I'm not going to show you that. There were other tankers, so for example, TMV would be the six-wheel milk tankers, again, right at the end of their life. They were refurbished by the Milk Marketing Board, and I don't believe they were ever actually used. They were kind of standby wagons, but they got the coding TMV, so they are potentially out there in model form because both Hornby and Dapol produce a model of that wagon. Now, U is a pretty defunct category. It did exist originally, and I do actually have an example from Bachmann of a U-coded wagon. It's, you might have guessed actually by looking at it, it's the China clay wagon, and it's just coded UCV. Now, you may be thinking, but you've already showed us one of these with the OOV. Well, actually, the U-TOPS classification became defunct, and the wagons that were in that classification were recoded. So the China clay wagons started out in the U classification and then were later reclassified in the O classification. So this merely models a wagon probably in the mid-1970s condition. That said, they probably persisted for a time after the official abolition of that TOPS code because well, these wagons probably didn't get repainted all that often. So that's where the U code comes in. But you won't see any wagons running around the network now, and indeed not since the very early 80s were any wagons coded in the U classification series. V denotes vans, and there were quite a few different vans. Pretty much actually air braked vans seem to make up the bulk of the different subsets within this TOPS classification. But what I've got here is, I'm going to just dig this out for you. This is probably one of the most common vans that would appear with a TOPS code. And it's quite simply VVV is the code on that. All the V's, VVV. V for van, V for the subcategory between the different vans, and then V at the end for vacuum brakes. And these were pretty common, and it was very much a catch-all TOPS code. An awful lot of the earlier BR 9-foot wheelbase wagons, and also some of the wagons that passed into BR ownership from the Big Four that survived long enough to potentially get a TOPS code would have ended up in this catch-all category. But I also want to show you this wagon, and this is a VBB. Now, probably more commonly known and referred to as the VBA wagon. With the air braking long wheelbase wagons, they had the VA, VB, VC, VD, were essentially just differing ways of either they had vents, didn't have vents, the type of doors that they had on the side. So the second letter is really to tell the consumer what type of wagon this was to be able to use it. So certain traffic flows required certain configuration of doors. So for example, the VCAs were used principally for chocolate traffic from Rowntree's in York, and also from the Bristol factory. So they weren't long lasting, but they were particularly suited for that traffic flow. This particular one, VBB, the B at the end means that it's air braked, and the reason I wanted to show you this one is that it's also through vacuum piped. And what that means is that made up in a train, it can go in an air brake train, and it works just fine with train acting brakes on the wagon itself. But if you marshalled this into a vacuum brake train, whilst the brakes on the wagon wouldn't actually operate from the locomotive, it would at least pass the air line through to the next wagon in the train. So it could be put in the middle of a vacuum braked train, and it wouldn't stop the wagons after it from being able to be still braked on vacuum. Well, there are also wagons that fall into the W range, but this is pretty much defunct now. It was once upon a time used for some container wagons. Again, not a code that I have anything in my collection to show you. An X, this is for exceptional load wagons, and whilst I do have quite a few of those wagons, such as well trolls, in my collection, none of them are actually featured coded in that TOPS classification. But that's pretty much for wagons that were for oversized loads, unusual loads, things like transformers, boilers, that kind of thing. Y and Z, well, these are departmental wagons. We touched on departmental with the Q-coded coaches, but Y and Z go to very specific categories of departmental wagons. The Y was for bogie wagons and Z was for non-bogie wagons. Quite easy to work that out, but probably by far one of the most common bogie wagons in the departmental fleet is the Sea Cow range of wagons. It's available from both Bachmann and Hornby, and this particular example is a Hornby one, and this is coded YGH, and I'll be coming to that H in a moment because we've not actually touched upon that. You might be thinking, vacuum brake, air brake, got it covered. Well, actually, it was a little bit more complicated for that because there was a third type of braking system, and this particular wagon has that braking system. But the Y denotes the bogie departmental wagon, the G for the type of wagon. In this particular case, this is a Sea Lion, and the H, well, that H means that it's got dual brakes. So this has got air brakes, But it's got vacuum brakes, but you're thinking, oh, hold on, if it's got both, surely it should be an X. Well, actually, no, the H denotes that it's got AFI vacuum brakes, and these were faster acting. So it's quite a rare code, and really the majority of the time that you'll see it will be on some of these engineers' wagons. They did exist on, for example, a PAF, which was a type of grain wagon. So F would have been AFI vacuum braking on its own. But it's just another letter to look out for, and also look out for G. Again, G is not something that I have in my collection to show you, but that essentially means that it's got piped air and AFI braking. So once you get your head around it, it's all fairly simple. Another Y-coded wagon, well, we've got this Queen Mary brake van, but in a later Satlink livery, and this is coded YZW. And what I actually wanted to show you this for more than anything else is that W at the end. It's another braking code to touch upon, and that means that this wagon has vacuum braking, but it's also air piped, so it could run in an air brake train and the air brake could pass to the next wagon behind it, but it could also work in a vacuum brake train, and that would mean that the brakes on this wagon could be applied by the train locomotive. Z-coded wagons, well, they're departmental wagons, but generally speaking, four-wheel wagons. And I've got here ZEO, and this is one of the old iron ore hoppers in a Gulf Red Engineers livery. And essentially Z means it's in the engineers fleet, E, again, type of use that this will be put to, and O means that it's unbraked and it doesn't have any through air piping. Another wagon here to show you. This is a brake van, but with a departmental Z code, and ZTP, P meaning it's through vacuum piped, and T, I think it's something to do with being a personnel carrier. There's a lot of the time the brake vans in the engineers fleet would double up as being a means for work crews to travel to and from work locations, because handy little stove in there and seats. I hope that this has shed a little bit of light on TOPS codes for you. I'm not really an expert on TOPS code, but there is a lot of information out there on the internet, and hopefully I've touched upon some of the basics that might make some of this a little bit more sense, and also allow a little bit of a chink of a window into a world that you might want to explore further. But thanks again for joining me for this video. I hope it's been informative to you. Don't forget to like this video, and really important, share it too, and let others know about the videos that we've got going on this channel. And it's been great to see you. Also, don't forget as well that on the 22nd of September this year, 2019, we're going to be having the very first Jenny Monday Club Big Sunday meetup at the East Lancs Railway, Bury Bolton Street at 12 midday. So if you want to come and join the fun and get to meet some of the other watchers of this channel, then we'll be there, and it'll be great to meet you and put some faces to some names. But until next time, you take really good care of yourself. This is me, Jennifer Kirk, saying bye for now. Today's video has been brought to you in part thanks to the generous donation of my fans on Patreon. And an extra special huge thanks goes out to Anthony Kidson, Michael Churchwood, Bob Threeton, Alec Ralph, Anthony Hunt, William Wade, Wayne Johns, Offshore Allen, and oorail.co.uk. If you'd like to help support the show, head on over to patreon.com/Jennifer Kirk. Thank you. Today's video has been brought to you by my books, Bringing Home the Stars, Twinkle Little Star, and also you can get the complete comic collections of All Over the House, Books 1, Books 2, and also the wacky zany Life of Knobty Mouse. Thanks, and catch you later.